Welcome everyone to day 2 of the Cutting Edge Conference. I appreciate you all being here and thank you for coming back for another day. This one's gonna be a little bit longer than yesterday. It's also gonna be a little bit of a different style presentation. But I'd really recommend while I'm talking here that you go and get on a larger screen. We're gonna be having a guest on today speaking with myself, and we're gonna be going through numbers. We're probably gonna go through Excel spreadsheets and some like fine details. So if you're watching on a mobile device, in the next minute or two, if you can get, or even next 5 minutes, because I'll probably chat with him for a little bit beforehand, go watch this on a TV, a bigger screen, a desktop or a laptop. Something more than a mobile device would be highly recommended. On this size screen, it's going to be kind of tough for you to see what's going on, especially if we start going through some numbers. So highly recommend you get on a larger device for today's keynote. Like I said, this is gonna be a bit of a different presentation. Yesterday, we had talked a lot more high energy marketing, advertising, more offense, which is great. And we love it. And we love upsells. And we love those at Copilot, the new features that we just launched. However, there's also, to every great football team, you have to have offense and you have to have defense. And defense is you can't lose your shirt on the deal. I don't care if you're Patrick Mahomes in terms of offense and you can score all the points in the world, but if you literally have no defense, you will lose money. And so yesterday was offense, today is defense. And we're going to be talking about job costing and price matrices and how you can never lose your shirt on a job again if you do them correctly. And this is knowing your numbers, and everyone talks about knowing your numbers. Today, we're going to dive into it pretty deep. And so it's going to get a little bit more dense than yesterday, but I just so recommend you stick with us. I know it's going to be tempting because there's not going to be pictures and graphics and slides, and I'm not going to be yelling and screaming. But this is important stuff. No one really, you don't see the linebackers of a football team, the defensive linemen on like the front cover of newspapers and magazines. You see the quarterback, the running back, the wide receivers, the offense. Those are the more glamorous positions. And typically talking about marketing and new customers and even upselling like yesterday attracts a larger audience. But it is so important that you have the defensive lineman, because if you don't have the defensive lineman, we're going to have trouble ever protecting a touchdown or a field goal or any sort of points against our team. And I don't want to see you get points scored against you. And in this case, points scored against you is you losing your shirt on a job. When you think it was going to take $2,000 and it ends up taking $5,000, that $3,000 loss is putting people out of business. And at larger size scales, if you're doing $50,000, $100,000 projects, those can really affect you and put you out of business and make you go bankrupt. I was just at someone last week. Literally, they told me, they said, this $30,000 job, if it goes wrong, I will go bankrupt. And so therefore, I will be on this job the entire day, all the time, and I will not trust my crew to take over the project management of this job because I must make this job work. It's a lot of pressure and stress. It'd be so much better if you knew the pricing, you knew how to do estimates, so that when you gave the estimate and the proposal, when it's accepted, you knew the job was going to make money. You knew it was going to make profit. And that's what I want to talk about today. I'm going to be bringing someone on today that is just an awesome person. Not only does he have a fantastic first name, great representation of the Mike brand. Not only does he represent small people like myself very, very well, makes me proud. He gives back a lot to the community, and he shares a lot of these nuts and bolts that don't get a lot of pizzazz and views on YouTube, but they're so important. So as much as you're going to be tempted to click off today because we start drilling deep, just hang with me. Even if we start going down a path and for 2 or 3 minutes you kind of zone out, just hop back in. Even if you are having to do it on a mobile device and you might not see all the numbers as we dig into some of the software and Excel and start figuring out some math, please just try to grasp the concepts of what we're talking about. It's so important. And I really do believe that this discussion that we have for the next hour or so is going to be extremely valuable, and you might want to rewatch it. You definitely are going to want to take action on the things that we share today. And so without any further delay, let's go ahead and roll it. Let me get this set up real quick. It'll take me 10 seconds, and it's going to be great. Here we go. All right, thanks everyone for joining us. Today, I'm very honored to have the master of job costing and price matrices, and that's Mike Callahan from SimpleGrowth. Mike, before we jump in, maybe just give a quick bio for those who don't know you, what you do at SimpleGrowth, and really kind of what makes you qualified to talk about job costing and price matrices.
Yeah, Mike, appreciate you having on everything you're doing for the green industry here and raising the level of professionalism. Quick background, owned a lawn and landscape company for about 27, 28 years in upstate New York. Ended up multi seven-figure business, ended up exiting that business and got really in deep in the numbers as we went in through high school and college. Didn't really know my numbers, put my head down, grinded like everybody else. But eventually some of the stuff we got lucky enough to get right. Some of the stuff, honestly, Mike, we got wrong. There was one year we lost a significant amount of money. So we dove in probably about 15 years ago, ballpark, and really started to understand what it costs to operate per hour per guy, our break-even numbers, and what our revenue per hour was. And the delta between those, the difference would be our bottom line net profit. So we went in, and in part of my journey becoming an absentee owner, I need to make sure the financials in my business made sense. So we went out and built pricing matrices with job costing budgeted hours for all the services in my lawn care business. Long story short, we talked about it at the Landscape Summit, but that original business through high school and college ended up getting married to my high school sweetheart. I was working 80 to 100 hours a week, and that business literally caused a divorce. So my new mission right now in the lawn care and landscape industry is to help business owners take their life back from the business, or hopefully avoid the mistakes that I made in the early years. So that's really, as we dive in now, SimpleGrowth has been around now 6 years. We've got a team of about 25 full-time people, and 8 or 9 of them are all ex-clients of SimpleGrowth who've gone and scaled their businesses and actually exited and come back behind that mission. So we work with hundreds of businesses every year where we do software setup for job costing, price matrices, as well as automations.
Now, I assume when you got started with job costing, price matrices, et cetera, you didn't have the software at the time and probably were using Excel. And so I think today that's what we're going to show. And the reason is because, like, regardless of what CRM or software you use, these are things that you can do in your business. We believe, both Mike and myself, that software is going to make that easier. But let's go ahead and share some of the things you prepared, Mike, and talk about job costing and why it's so important. But before we jump into the actual numbers, I want to kind of go from more of a high level view and ask a few questions about how estimates work. And everyone always has like estimate system, and everyone wants to create a system for everything. But can you kind of break down for me, what are some of the different ways of doing estimates, and which are most preferred, and what are most common when it comes to any home service business?
Yeah. So Mike, as we all start out, there's really 3 different ways we estimate. And I think myself, when we first started out, we started out with number 1. We go up to a house as a basic lawn mowing example, mow, blow, and edge. We're looking at that lot and we say, okay, what is my competitors charging for us? What will the market bear? So if we think, hey, that's a $65 cut, really with no foundation, that's what we charge. Obviously, that's not where we want to be, but that, unfortunately, that's where we all start out. At least I did, and you probably did yourself. As we evolve, the next one is I like to call guesstimating. And really what guesstimating is using your experience as an industry expert, going out and looking how long is it going to take to mow, stick edge, weed whack, and blow that property. So if we're looking at that same property, it's going to take 1 hour for one guy or girl to do it. And our revenue per man hour goal, what we charge is $80, 1 hour times $80, is we need to charge $80 for that job. And then eventually we go into a process, something called production rate based estimating. So in that same example, we'll be able to go into satellite imagery, just like we can in Copilot, and actually measure the square footage of the turf and save that into a job variable, so we call a custom field. But on a very high level, we're going to be able to go in and set up a production rate based estimating system based on your guys and girls production and your equipment setup. So we can go in and measure that and now be able to delegate that to either an internal office, command center, or a virtual assistant somewhere halfway around the world. But by measuring that property, they'll be able to create a predictable, scalable estimate that does not revolve around the business owner. And once we get into our job costing, whether it's guesstimating or the actual production rate based estimating, when we produce that estimate and turn it into a job, we're going to have a price, a budgeted time that needs to be done, and a cost before profit. If everything works to plan, our bottom line net profit is where we project it to be.
Got it. So we got market-based, time-based, and then production rate-based. Now, obviously, in the perfect world, we're using the more sophisticated version of that pricing. But realistically, when we come to the real world and where the rubber really hits the road, if you had to kind of give a rough either employee count or revenue per year that you see these 3 systems being used, and when does it make sense to actually take the time to create and go from what is your competitors, what are they charging versus labor-based rate? Like, when does it actually make sense to make that jump, or should people be doing that from day one?
Yeah, I guess the answer there is really as soon as possible. I mean, there's companies that come to us when we help set this up that they've never actually gotten into business yet, and they've come from other industries and know they need these numbers. So if you don't know what it costs you per hour break even, that's a number you really need to know. Most of the businesses probably come in around 200,000 to 250,000 up to a half a million. But that being said, we have businesses come to us to 3 million to 5 million in annual revenue. They don't know their numbers and they're literally at best guesstimating. I would say sooner the better, but about 250 to half a million is where we see most folks come in. And that's traditionally not in a full scale production rate based estimating. They're going in and literally going in and basing it on their experience. But the idea here is when we set this up in a software like Copilot, we can actually put in the time that we think it's going to take. And then the system will non-emotionally calculate it. Because as you well know, Mike, if we're in the spring season, we're trying to add 25 or 30 lawns this week to hit our sales goal. You and I are walking up and going, well, if I shave $3 or $4 off that mow, I'm sure I'm going to get it. And that's going to help me get to my sales goal. And we unintentionally hurt ourselves. So to really answer your question, 250 to half a million is usually where we see it. If you're watching this, I'd suggest going out and buying education, learn your competition. The sooner the better with these numbers.
And then when it comes to actually implementing this in the business, whether it be software or doing it in Excel, why do you think that people don't do this? So for example, is it for myself, like, is it, the fact that I'm just too lazy to go figure out my production rates? Is it the fact that I'm not willing to do some time motion studies or clock my guys? Or is it the fact that, like, I'm maybe afraid of software? What are the most common things that you see? Oftentimes you're seeing owners coming to you looking for help, but why do they either have they not done it in the past, or they decide not to do it and they stick with the old guesstimating model that so much of our competition uses?
Yeah, I guess there's a couple. So I mean, we literally work with hundreds of businesses a year. There's 2 or 3 common things we see, and honestly, I think after talking to these individuals, it's not that they don't know it or don't want to know it. They just don't like. They almost don't want to feel stupid, so they won't ask anybody, "Hey, what should I be doing here?" And they're not going to ask their local competition. But if they ask their local competition, 99% of them don't have a clue either. So we're all in the same boat. The cool thing is with YouTube and all the stuff out there, like now it's actually being talked about. But like I said, we've got companies 3 to 5 million in annual revenue that realize they need to figure this out and they don't have it figured out. And they're like, you know what? We're playing Russian roulette with our financial future, not even for ourselves, but our employees. Once in a while, that's going to happen. That chamber is going to be loaded and get you right in the face. So really, I think a lot of it is just, we know we need to do it as business owners, but we're scared to ask for help or actually go out and get the education. And, hopefully step number 2 that we talk about is really going in and being able to work strategically in your business 4 hours a week. And that's 10%. Traditionally, as we get bigger, we want to get to 20% of our time as being strategic, working on it, not in, as Michael Gerber would say. So it's literally A, they're scared to ask for help, or B, they're in there just grinding on the truck, doing the estimates, fighting fires. And it never becomes a priority until we go in November, December and look, and we lost $50,000, $60,000 this year. And we're like, wow, we need to fix this or get out of this business. So don't have the time. And a lot of times folks are embarrassed to ask for help around it. And I had to go out and hire a consultant to make sure the stuff that I built in my Excel sheet before we started to scale to $1 million and well beyond was actually correct. The consultant after 3 hours said, "Why did you hire me and fly me in?" I go, "Well, if we're making this financial investment, I need to know these numbers are correct before I put this money in it." So even myself, I think in the early days, Mike, I was a little embarrassed to ask for help or to confirm that what I actually put together was correct. Lucky enough that it was based on some of the college classes I took, though.
Totally. And I think sometimes it's just a matter of not having the humility. Even if you grow in a big business, you can build a massive business on guesstimating, but it's a matter of luck, and you're not going to be able to pass that along to someone else. But it is somewhat humbling to say, "Hey, look, I am literally throwing a dartboard in terms of how long something's going to take," or literally just that's $400. Like that's kind of similar to Mr. Jones, who's $500. Like that sort of, like, you can build a big business, but it's going to take a level of humility and learning and re-educating yourself on something like a software, Excel, or even just looking at math. Like, no one enjoys math. We get it, but it might be necessary to actually systematize the business. Now, can you?
The other issue, Mike, too, is as you're looking at this, the old saying, good data in, good data out. That's usually not even the case. What it is there's no data in, no data out. So when you're utilizing a software like Copilot, you want to be able to get that data in your hands. So even if they want to fix some of this, that's where we help a lot of people with industry production rates, because a lot of times people think they have the data they need. And when you actually go to look, it actually is not being put into the software in Excel sheet or even pen and paper.
100%. 100%. I want to actually kind of dive in and talk a little bit about what are some of the numbers that are financials that potentially someone would need to know before implementing price matrices, whether it be on Copilot and Excel. I really don't care what software, but like, what are the numbers that are needed? Because if we're talking about inputs and outputs, and what are those inputs or that data that is needed?
Yeah. So really, as you're getting bigger, unless you're 3 to 5 million, maybe a little bit bigger, there's a certain time and place where you want to get a break even number per division. As you're going up to maybe 2, 3 million, any of the industry consultants that are doing the financials, such as Jim Houston, we saw at the Landscape Summit. We work with a lot of Jim's clients. Jim's going to keep that as a average break even across all the divisions. But literally, the staggering thing, I think, that got a lot of people's attention at the summit when I was on stage and I said, anybody who knows the numbers, raise their hand. Well over 500 people in there in audience. And the lights were bright, but I couldn't have counted probably more than 20 people in there that actually knew that number. But that's common. 95% of the people we work with to help build out these numbers don't know that number when they come in. And it's something liberating. But at a bare minimum, no matter if you're using software or not, I would say, go out and get that break even number, what it costs you to operate per man hour. Because like you said, Mike, we're throwing it against the wall and it's crazy. You can be in the right market. You can put in the work, have your head down and grind, and just get lucky. And we've seen people get to 3 to 5 million just getting lucky. But wouldn't you rather know at the end of the day that that number you're putting out there is a number that actually is going to drive a bottom line profit?
And sometimes also have the ability that, a 1 or 2 year turnaround of your business going from unprofitable to being profitable, actually have a way to measure that roadmap, right? If you're only $2 above break even now and your goal is $10 above break even, it's nice to be able to kind of know along that way if you're improving and moving towards that goal. And data is the number one way to do that. So break even point, super important KPI, something to know in the business. What other inputs or financial requirements or data is required to do price matrices?
So the cool thing is with a lot of this, you can build a pricing matrix based on the guesstimating system. We don't really want to throw you in the deep end, Mike, if you can't swim in those swimmies, right? That's crazy. So the idea is we want to be able to graduate into that as you're using a software that's doing job costing and production tracking in the reporting. Even if you don't have the industry production rates, you can use the guesstimating and then take those variables and eventually take your own data and create it. So I don't know if that makes sense, but really, I think later today we're going to talk about it. But what we really want to do is blueprint out the actual process to make sure it's sense. Because Mike, you would never build a house without a blueprint, right?
No,
you're not going to put random windows and doors in there. Well, why would you build a matrices, whether it's guesstimated production, without building a blueprint to systematically make sure your profit margin around there? And when I went to become an absentee owner, the sheet I'm going to show you guys later here, if we get into it, is literally the exact blueprint I used in my company to be able to delegate these things to my team where I wasn't the single point of failure and I wasn't needed to do these things on a daily basis.
Totally. Maybe could we kind of help someone walk through the process of finding their break even? And I can fire some like random numbers for you. And I think you have a spreadsheet maybe you can share with us to kind of figure out what that break even is. And then we can move on in the process of getting job costing and price matrices actually installed.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in the hotel room here, so we'll see if this works. But if you can, I think you are on the wheels there. I'm going to have you give me some numbers. So I'm going to blow this up. By no means are we doing financial consulting anymore. This is going to be a rough and dirty way to get at it. So the numbers are only as good as you give me, Mike. But okay, we're going to throw some numbers in here and take a look at it. So hopefully everybody's using a financial software such as QuickBooks. But the first thing we're going to be looking at, hopefully driven from your payroll, is we're looking as the only thing we're looking for, Mike, is not your office staff, not the estimator, not training. All we're looking at is the actual production for your guys and girls in your franchise or fictitious, whatever this company is. But basically when they clock into the shop to when they clock out, how many hours for this year were they actually looking at?
Are we looking like per day, like just like one day on average?
So I want the total of hours for the whole entire season. So let's say we started in January and as we're watching this, we're going to get up right up to the end of October. And we're going to assume, because we're near the 10th of the month here, close, that those books are reconciled. So we have
got it. So all my employees for all my employees then for the whole year
in the field only.
Okay, let's do 5,775.
5,775. All right.
There you go.
All right. Next thing we're looking at is your expenses. So if we're pulling up QuickBooks, hopefully we have a budget. If not, this is something we want to look in the upper gear icon and set that budget. But Mike, what we're doing is going in under the reports on the left-hand side in your QuickBooks online, most likely at this point. And we're going to be running a profit and loss in an accrual basis. You're going to have two radio buttons, the one on the right. And we'll probably set that between January and the end of October here. Hopefully those books are reconciled. But we want to make sure these expenses line up to the production hours you just gave me. But if we run that report in a accrual basis, up top, you're going to have your revenue, and there's a COGS account, cost of goods sold. So you're going to have your labor, equipment, and subcontractors. I'm sorry, your labor, your materials, and subcontractors. Now, some, depending on your accountant, may have tucked gas in here or fuel. Predominantly really don't want that in there, but if you're doing it consistently year after year and it's consistent, that's probably okay. But most likely, Mike, you got your labor costs, you got your material costs, and your subcontractor. So we're going to get that total. And then if you scroll all the way to the bottom of the screen, we're going to have a total expense, and that's going to be your general administrative fixed cost. So when we add those two numbers together, that's going to be the total expense that you've spent for the whole entire year for everything, including your office, your rent, the guys and girls in the field, you name it. Total expense, if you took your top line revenue and subtract it from that total expense, that's what would be left at profit. So I'm looking for a number for your total expenses for the whole entire year.
The whole year. So if we had like 5,000 hours, I'd say like, I'm just gonna make it $458,606.
All right.
There's like the total cost. This is just COGS, right? Oh, and G&A. So like kind of everything. Okay, got it. Okay.
It's all your expenses in. Now, including that COGS account, we have materials and subcontractors. We're going to want to take that number and actually back it out. But they're actually included in that 458 you gave me up top. So on that line item, was there any materials that your company actually used?
So now I got to back this out number. Okay, so let's just give let's do 76,784 for materials.
All right, no sense.
I gotta take that. I gotta do calculator, make sure I get this math right. And then let's do for subs, let's do 62,546. And then that's gonna leave me, let's see here. Let's do 27,000 for debt service, 27,125 for the debt service.
Well, wait a minute, Mike. You gave me these numbers here, and I'm looking at your P&L.
Yeah.
And that bottom line profit, whatever that was, you don't have to share it publicly for that franchise if that's what you're looking at. It looks like you made X amount of dollars profit at the bottom line. So a lot of times people will go, well, really, based on this equation right now, based on my eyesight here in this small print, is $55.29. That's what it's costing you right now per man hour, per guy clocking in and out of the shop. Now, the silent killer, Mike, as you well know, is your long-term debt or payables do not live on your profit and loss. They live on this silent kind of killer where we usually don't look at it. It's actually on your balance sheet. So if you go into your balance sheet, you've already done some homework for me before the call, but that's the biggest thing that folks will come in, Mike, and they'll say, well, I made $150,000 this year. And then we go over to look at their long-term payables, and they've got $50,000 or $60,000 worth of debt pay. Now, be careful as you're looking at this, Mike, too. And I know obviously this isn't the case here, but depending on the tax season, your account for tax purposes may accelerate this depreciation. So general GAAP principles, we probably want that amortized over 5 years as a benchmark. But that number may be higher depending on the tax season if you can write off trucks all in one shot. So, Mike, what was that number? I didn't want to cut you off, but I want to put some context to that number because there's a lot of confusion around that number.
So for your debt service?
What? Yep.
Yeah, 27,125 is what I wrote down here.
All right. So we're at 55.29, Mike.
And just to clarify for everyone, in that number, Mike, are we taking into account just the payments? Like if I have a $400 per month payment and 100 of that is interest and 300 of that is actual principal, am I doing the full 400 or am I just looking at interest expense?
Right now, we're looking at the full payment. And like I said, this is a down and dirty way. There's definitely industry consultants for several $1,000s over a day and a half, 2 days. We'll get this down. This number is pretty close though, Mike. I mean, I've seen it within 20 to 25 cents an hour. And this number will get you there. The fortunate or unfortunate part is a lot of the industry consultants right now that do the finance, there's not a lot of them. Some of them are booked out depending on the season, 2 to 3 months. So this is a rough way to get that number. If you've never had it, this is going to get you in the ballpark to start. So by no means am I saying this is the end all be all. There's there's a single overhead recovery, there's a multiple overhead recovery, conversation for a whole different day. But this number is going to at least get you in the ballpark within 25 cents to 50 cents an hour. And if you don't know the number, this is a hell of a lot better than not having it. But to answer your question, yes, it's the total long-term debt payment. We want to have that built in.
Could you zoom in a little bit there, Mike, just so we can see the columns and the numbers there a little bit better?
Yep. There
Perfect. And I think it's super important because like when I fly out and do these turnarounds, for example, it's just a matter of so many of the times I get the P&L and they're making $40,000, $50,000 on the P&L. And I say, well, does that include, the owner's pay? And sometimes it does. But then what so many of the times they're like, well, why don't I see $40,000 in my bank account? And sure enough, you look at the balance sheet and there's a whole bunch of debt. And if they're paying $3,000, $4,000 a month in debt service, and all of a sudden that $40,000 in profit evaporates, although it looks like you're profitable on the P&L. So super important, because although if you don't take this into account, you could have a break-even point that looks far better than what it should be, and you still are running out of money. So it's another important key to add when it comes to the costing side of things.
Yeah, and this actually is in the ballpark. I'm seeing some of these as high as some of these larger companies, $68 to $72 per man hour. They've jumped up significantly. But if you look at it, if you did not include that debt service, Mike, that was 55 to now 59. So, I mean, that's an extra $4 or $5 an hour. So times 5,700, almost 5,800. That's a lot of money that we potentially are not accounting for. So as we're playing this out, Mike, so if we're at basically $60 per man hour cost based on this division, what's your goal? What do you want to charge per man hour?
Well, in this example, when we're saying that the break even is $59.98, are you saying that if we charge $60, we'd basically be at break even, or is there other expenses not being accounted for here?
This is all in.
Got it. So
charge 60, you'd really be broke even as long as everything went to play.
No, depending on the way that you're doing your financials and your kind of your projections, was this where you would recommend giving more like a percentage of profit on top of that number in terms of hourly rate, or how would you recommend someone go about figuring out what they should actually charge based upon this data?
Yeah, so I guess not a loaded question, but I guess it's really up to you and your business and what the desire is. Now there's some industry averages. If we're fertilization and weed control, we probably should be about 45% net. Maintenance has got some other ones. Design builds got some other percentage. So it's up to you where you want to be. I'm going to suggest you need to be at least double digit profit margin, at least 10%. Industry average landscape maintenance is about 4 to 6% net from the last industry average I saw. As far as I'm concerned, if you're not making double digit net profits, you might as well be the greeter at Walmart. A lot less stress and probably making more money at that point. So I'm going to suggest at least double digits, but probably 18 to 20% on maintenance and 45 to maybe 47% net on your fertilization weed control. So I mean, if you went in here, you probably, let's just say fictitiously, we're at $75. If we went in and just went in and divided this out here. And I apologize, this is taking a hot minute because I don't have my other keyboard here.